wanderer, life adventurer, said he's a secret philosopher. He's a wandering wanderer. Hello there, fellow peregrinos. Welcome to episode 24 of El Camino de Santiago, Pilgrim's podcast, where we talk about planning, preparation, and packing for walking the Camino de Santiago, as well as tips, tricks, and hacks to make your journey along the way a lot more enjoyable. We want to put more bounce in your boots, more cash in your days, take the grim out of the pilgrimage. There, I got it over with. And in this episode, we have our leader of the Camino de Santiago planning group on Facebook, more than 7,000 members. Heather Knight-Reiter is also the blogger for the Renegade Pilgrim blog and a podcaster. So Heather, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to talk to you today about the Camino de Santiago.
Thank you very much. And your choice of coffee, just so the listeners know, to power you through this is?
Yes, I am drinking a Chiapan Mexican blend light roast brewed by a local roaster here in Portland, Oregon.
And you don't get that in Starbucks, right?
No, you don't.
Just around Heather's house. So if you're in Portland, Oregon, go knocking on the door for a bit of that.
You betcha.
So let's talk all things Camino. You are the leader of our group, Heather, so thank you much for being our leader, the Camino de Santiago planning group. It's a real coup to have you on the podcast, so thank you very much for your time. And let's go back to when you first heard about the Camino. Where were you? What was happening? Who did you hear it from? Tell us the story.
Yeah, that was a long time ago. I was in college in the early 90s, and one of the things that I was really involved in the Catholic young adult ministry or the campus ministry at the university that I was at in Montana, and the parish priest. He would take groups of people from the church every 2 years on a pilgrimage to the Holy Land. So he would take people to Israel for about 10 days and do this pilgrimage. And part of that preparation was we had to meet, I think it's probably like once a month or maybe like every 2 weeks. We would meet in the parish hall, and he would give us like history lessons and just basic information about like what pilgrimage is and these kinds of things. And I very distinctly remember learning about the Camino de Santiago. And this would have been in 1994. We prepared the year before we went. We went in 1995, and when I came back from Israel, I had pilgrimage on the brain. I couldn't stop thinking about the Camino, and so it took a while. And in 2010, I had received an insurance settlement from an accident I had been in a couple years prior, and I all of a sudden had this money, but I didn't have the time to take off and do like a 30-day walk. And so what I ended up doing is I talked to my boss and I was like, hey, I'd like to take a leave of absence because I'm an American and we don't get vacation like Europeans do. And so I talked to my boss and said, hey, I'd like to take a leave of absence for a couple of months so I could go do this walk. And he turned me down. So I thought about it a little bit longer, and I was kind of at that point in time in my life. This was in 2010. I was like, I don't know if I'm going to have this opportunity ever again. So I'm going to quit my job. I have no safety net, but I'm going to quit my job and I am going to go and travel. And so I left for Spain in April of 2010 for my first walk. And so it was really interesting because at that point in time, now it was like 15 years past when I had first heard about the Camino. I had been dreaming about it. I had read a few books, not a lot, but I'd read a few books, was involved in one of the online forums. So I felt like I was really well prepared. And so I decided since I quit my job, I was going to do a trip around the world. And so I started off with the Camino, and I ended my trip in Japan. And that's that. We can talk about what happened in Japan a little bit later, because it does actually relate a little bit to the Camino and kind of how my trip started and how my trip ended. But that's kind of the gist of how I decided to do the Camino, when my first walk was, and it was a fabulous experience. I'm still so glad that I was able to do it.
Wow. So you actually quit your job after dreaming about it for 15 years.
Yep.
And what was the first Camino that you did?
The first Camino that I did was the Camino Frances. Started in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, went all the way to Santiago, and then the following year, I think it was the following year, I served as a Hospitalera in Santo Domingo de la Calzada.
Wow.
And then the following year after that, because it's a shorter walk, I was able to take a couple of weeks off from work. Funny story, I actually did go back to the job that I had. I went back 4 months later. They hadn't been able to replace me, and
Brilliant.
I was able to get my old position back. And so a couple of years later, or a few years, yeah, I guess it was 2 years later, in 2012, I decided to do the Camino Portuguese. And I
Mm.
walked from Porto to Santiago. And I also, in my around the world travels, had met somebody. I actually did go back to Israel, and I had met a woman in Israel whose husband was Portuguese. And so our paths ended up crossing again in Lisbon. So I actually flew into Lisbon, took the train to Porto, and then walked from Porto to Santiago. And I'm dreaming of some point in time in the near future, probably going to do the Norte is going to be my next Camino.
You and me both. That's definitely the next one on
Yeah,
my list as well. I love it when the good guys win, by the way. You
yeah,
actually, you had your cake and ate it, and that's brilliant. I
yeah,
love that. Everything fell
yeah.
into place for you in the end.
Yep,
It's
absolutely.
funny because something a lady said to me on the Camino Frances, like my first day in Saint Jean Pierre de Bourg, she said, every now and again you have to frighten yourself to feel alive, and
Yeah,
sounds like you did that by quitting your job, but you got it back in the end anyway.
yeah,
Oh wow, and you also got to be a hospitalera as well. I must
yeah.
ask you about that experience. How was it?
It was fantastic. It really, I think it gives you a different perspective, because as pilgrims, we're so focused on, basically you walk, you get you get into the albergue, you take a shower, you change into clean clothes, you wash your dirty clothes, you dry them up, you go to bed, or you go to dinner, you go to bed, you get up in the morning, you do it all over again, and that's the rhythm, right? That is
Mm.
that is what that is what you do for like 30 days if you're walking from Saint Jean. And being a hospitalera, you're in one spot. The pilgrims that come through, it's a different group every day. Every group has a different personality. Some people are a little bit more flexible than others. And you just kind of get this appreciation for like all of the amazing people that took care of you when you were on your Camino, to be able to then return that kindness to other people. And it was a fabulous experience. It was a lot of work. We were fortunate in that we didn't have to do the cleaning. The albergue that we were volunteering in, my sister actually came with me to volunteer, and the place the albergue that we were in, they actually had a cleaning crew that would come in, but our responsibilities were in the morning. We had to make sure everybody got out, and then making sure that everybody was out, making sure that if there was luggage transfer happening, that we were there so that the luggage transfer people could come in. And then we'd have about a 2 or 3 hour break in the middle of the day, and then we'd open up the doors again at 2 o'clock, and we'd do it again until about 6 o'clock. And then the cofradia that ran the albergue, they would come, and then they'd hang out in the albergue and let us go get dinner or whatnot. So it was a very different experience, and I would love to go back and serve again. But the world is a big place, so I've been finding myself exploring other parts of it as well.
Yeah, and what's the one thing you'd say that pilgrims can do to help the hospitaleras and hospitaleros?
I would say the biggest thing is that if a albergue is donativo, give more than you normally would,
Right.
because a lot of them, I know that was a big issue when we were volunteering, and that was like 9 years ago, and is that when you have a donativo albergue, it doesn't mean free. It means that they're operating on the kindness of the pilgrims. And so if you are staying in places where you're normally paying, like maybe 5 to 7 euros a night or something, or even 10 euros a night, maybe chip in 10, 15, 20 euros, just to kind of help out, because all of that money that you donate goes back into the albergue. It pays for the electricity, it pays for the water, it pays for the maintenance of the building, sheets if they're using like real sheets on the beds, things like that. So I would say just understand that the hospitaleras are there to help you, and just return the kindness that is extended to you. And then also, sometimes hospitaleros can be a little grumpy. Understand that maybe something might have happened previously from another, by another pilgrim that may have put that hospitalero in a grumpy mood, and just be nice. I think like that's like the biggest thing, is just to be kind to one another, and and kind of spread that along the way.
And understand that that generosity also extends to the fact that you guys are volunteering there as well, and so a little bit of patience on the pilgrims' behalf could be useful for you guys as well.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
And just for the listeners, who I know lots of them are on the west coast of the United States where you are,
Hmm.
I can tell that from my analytics. Could you just let us know how you made your way to the starting points at Porto and
Sure.
at Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, please?
Yeah, so for Saint Jean Pied de Port, what I did, and this is what I do recommend for people, especially if you have extra time. I know that, again, with Americans, we don't have a lot of vacations, so sometimes it can be very stressful to get to the starting point. But what I did is I flew into Paris. I spent a night in Paris just so that I could kind of get my bearings and start dealing with jet lag. And then the following day, I got in a train and I took the train to Bayonne, and then from Bayonne, I spent the night there, and then I took the train the next day to Saint Jean. I spent a night in Saint Jean, and then I walked. So I took my time getting to Saint Jean, and then got on the way. I think the one thing that I would do differently if I were to do that route again is I would stop in Orison, just because that first day, if you're not in very good shape, can be really, really hard. And it's nice to just be able to break it up a little bit. For Porto, I had kind of an interesting experience. I had my very first flight cancellation. So my flight, I actually flew to Madrid, and then I think I booked like a Ryanair flight from Madrid to Lisbon. Spent a couple of days in Lisbon with my friend that happened to be in town from Israel. And then from there, I took the train to Porto and then started walking. So I kind of took a very leisurely approach, because I think I had like 2 or 3 weeks off from work at that point, because I had been saving up my vacation. And so I was able to kind of be very leisurely about how I got there. But I think from the US, especially from the West Coast, I do think it's best to fly into, if you're doing the French route, fly into Paris. If you're doing any of the other routes in Spain or Portugal, either fly direct into Portugal or fly into like Madrid and then catch like a local flight on like Ryanair or EasyJet to your destination.
Thank you very much for that, Heather. That's going to be very, very useful for the listeners on the west coast of the USA. Thank you. Okay,
Yeah.
so you're now. Let's have a look at some of the issues you encountered along the way
Oh
as a
yeah.
pilgrim, not as a hospitalera. So you are walking your first few days. You did say that you would stay in Horizon, which is the albergue, which is kind of about a quarter of the way up the first climb
Yep.
into the Pyrenees. And how did you get on with blisters, anything like that? Did you have a coping strategy that you were going to deploy before you left, or was it deal with it along the way?
Yeah, so I was very ill prepared for my first Camino. I had blisters that were extremely and excruciatingly painful. There were a couple of days where I did have to take the bus, and then in addition to blisters, I also developed plantar fasciitis. I'm not sure if you're familiar what that is, but it's basically like a tendonitis in the sole of your foot,
Hmm.
and so. Between those two, I did take some public transit a couple of times to accommodate for the pain. And the blisters, I used Compeed because that's what everybody was talking about back then.
Mm.
Um, since my Camino, I've become an avid hiker and backpacker. I've done some pretty, not like super long distance trails in the US, but I've done some like 30 and 50-mile hikes in the US and Canada. And one of my strategies is actually there's a type of tape. It's called Leuko tape. And I know my feet now like pretty well, so I know where I get blisters and I know where like those hot spots are. And so what I will actually do is pre-tape my feet, and I'll either use Leuko tape, or there's also a type of tape. It's called KT or kinesio tape. That also works really well because one of the things that causes blisters is heat, and friction causes heat. And so what the KT tape and the Leuko tape do is it reduces friction, which so it takes away one of those things that causes blisters.
So tape up your feet on those hot spots. Basically, it's the Leuko
Yep.
tape or the KT tape, Kinesio tape. I
Yep.
actually did put a link to those on our Facebook page a couple of episodes ago, but I'll refresh those and stick those up
Yeah.
again. So if you go to our podcast, our Facebook page, Camino de Santiago Pilgrims podcast, we'll put those up there. Thanks to those great tips from Heather. And so let's on your Camino Portuguese after becoming an avid hiker, you didn't have any blister problems?
I had like one tiny little blister, like probably on my second or third day, and and since I knew I was getting it, I was able to address it, and it was fine. Like I didn't have any problems at all after that. My second Camino was definitely a different experience, and because I had the experience for one, and two, after my first walk, I had become an avid hiker, and so I had done a lot more training and preparation for the Camino, and so my second Camino, like the Portuguese route, was the only problem I had on the Portuguese route is I chose to do the coastal route, and I've heard that it's a lot better marked now. But when I walked it in 2012, it was very difficult. I spent a lot of time chasing yellow arrows and getting lost, and not always in the best way because it was fairly remote on the coast. Like there were times where like, okay, if I'm walking down this path, am I going to end up in the ocean kind of
Really?
situation? So it was different issues, but I definitely had my kit was definitely dialed in. I had a very light backpack. I had great shoes. Everything, all my gear was like probably 100 times better than my first Camino.
Name of your backpack, just in case anyone's interested.
I am a huge fan of Osprey backpacks. I used the Osprey Aura the first year. I don't think they make that brand anymore. And then the second year, I used the Exos model, which I also do not believe they're making any longer, but it was a great backpack. It was about, I think my Exos was about 40 liters, and that's about between 40 and 50 liters, I think is about, I would say that's the maximum you want to go with a backpack on the Camino. And then, if you're having like your luggage transferred every day, then you can get away with like just a regular day pack, no problem. So,
Mm. Now I've seen on your blog at Renegade Pilgrim that you've got an actual link to lots of different Camino resources
yep.
and equipment. Do you want to tell the listeners that link or how to find that so they can go on there?
Yeah, it's on. I would have to double check the link for sure to make sure that it's working. But it's
It
an
is working.
Amazon
I've been on
list.
there
Okay,
literally
it is
just
good.
before. I've been
It's an
doing my
Amazon
detective
list.
work. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so if you were to go onto my Renegade Pilgrim website, and I'll double check after we chat today, I'll make sure that it's accurate and easy to find. But I do have like a resource section on my website, and it has a link to that Amazon group. And what I have on there is I have a list of like not only gear, and this is gear that I've used both like for backpacking, international travel, and also for my Caminos. So they're kind of multi-use kind of gear recommendations. The other thing that I also have is I have a really robust, and I'm still adding to it occasionally. I actually need to make a couple of updates because there was another book that just came out about the Camino, but I also have a book list. So that includes not only guidebooks, but also just books about the Camino that people can look at if they want to ahead of time. I read maybe 2 books, 3 books before my Camino, and then I didn't want other people's experiences to kind of influence mine. So I really tried to not read a lot about the Camino so that I could kind of go into it with an open mind.
Take it as you find it.
Yep,
And this is on your Renegade Pilgrim website as well, isn't it? That list.
correct.
Okay,
Yep,
so if you go onto Google, I believe, and just type in Renegade Pilgrim, then you should
yep.
find Heather's blog and website there. Brilliant.
And it's
Okay,
also I believe I have the link in our Camino de Santiago planning group as well. It would be under the files section. I do have that book list as well.
and if you haven't joined that group, join it as well because it's a great resource, a great place to find out some that zeroes in on the planning of the Camino and nothing else.
Yeah.
So look on Facebook groups, Camino de Santiago Planning, and you'll see Heather's 7,000 strong Facebook group on there. Brilliant. So let's talk about life in the albergues. You've seen it from both sides of the fence, Pilgrim
Yeah.
and Hospitalera. For those pilgrims that have never stayed in an albergue, give them an idea of what they can expect, some best practices, and how are they going to get a good night's sleep when they've never stayed in an albergue before.
Oh boy, I don't know about a good night's sleep. There were a couple of times along the way where I spent a little extra money and booked myself into a private albergue, or a couple of times I booked myself into like a like a hotel. And
Me
a
too.
hotel is like a loose term. It was more like just a hostel, but like with a private room. I would say that there's a couple of things that are super important for pilgrims when they're staying in an albergue. One, bring some earplugs because people snore. And two, if you're a snorer and you know that your snoring is like super disruptive, maybe consider staying in private accommodations if you can afford it. If you can't, I feel like the snoring is just kind of a part of the experience. Like you're not going to get away with it or get away from it. Um, the other thing too is never, ever, ever put your backpack on the bed. That's how bed bugs are spread from albergue to albergue, is by putting your backpack on the bed. So the biggest, like I'd say that's maybe even more important than like earplugs, is that like do not put your backpack on the bed. Keep it on the floor. Keep it away from the bed if you can. Like I wouldn't even rest it near the bed. And then just be really mindful of everyone else. So like usually lights out are usually 10 o'clock is probably the latest you'll see it. And then people tend to get up early. So like if you're one of those early risers and you want to get on the trail early, take your stuff, like throw it in, just toss it in your bag, and then take it out into the public area of the albergue, and then pack up your stuff. Because I don't know if this happened to you, but when I was on my walk, there were a lot of people that had their stuff wrapped in plastic bags and things like that, and that is a horrible sound to have to listen to for a couple of hours before you're ready to get up in the morning. So just be kind and aware of other people, and do what you can to minimize your impact on their experience.
That can blow the fuse of even the coolest temperaments, couldn't it? That and
Oh yeah.
it's the bag rustling and the Velcro ripping as well. The Velcro
Yes.
ripping and
Yes.
the zips going up and
Zippers.
down. Like it's 10 to
Yes.
4 in the morning. What's going on? What planet am I on?
Yep.
It's all part of the character building in a way. And you mentioned the earplugs and obviously packing the bags outside of the room. And one thing I've just come back from the Portuguese Camino again, and one thing I realised that would probably have been useful and possibly a bit extreme, Heather, is that my first 2 nights in the albergues, because I hadn't slept in my sleeping bag for a very, very, very long time, or probably a year between the previous Camino to that one,
Hmm.
and I couldn't get comfortable in my sleeping bag. So the first 2 nights, it was just trying to find that spot in your sleeping bag where you do feel
Hmm.
comfortable. So it might be worth trying to sleep in your sleeping bag a few nights when you're at home and finding your comfortable spot. And the pillows are normally not so comfortable in the albergues, I found personally.
Yeah.
And so maybe an inflatable pillow as well, that you can blow up and deflate. Um, this is maybe a bit extreme, but when I got to my third night of staying in the albergue, I actually managed to get some sleep because I kind of knew where my comfortable position was. So that could be another tip as well. Sounds extreme, but it would have been helpful because I'm really not the best version of myself when I've not slept very much.
Yeah.
and I don't like who I am when I've not slept very much. So I prefer to be
Yep.
on the Camino, spreading love and peace and good energy, not walking around like with a scowl on my face because I haven't slept. So that could be another tip as well. So thanks for your ideas on that one as well and your point of view. And bed bugs, is it a myth or is it something that's a very real problem?
No, they exist. So on my Portuguese walk, ironically enough, on my Portuguese walk, I experienced bed bugs at the end after I'd already left the Camino. I was staying in a hostel in Porto, and I was sleeping in my bed, and I woke up because it felt like something was literally crawling on me. It was the weirdest sensation ever, and I pulled apart my sheets and I pulled out my flash, my torch, and I was looking around, and sure enough, I think there were like two or three bugs in my bed, and they'd bit me. I had been bitten, and so I quickly walked down to the front desk. I put some clothes on. I walked down to the front desk and I was like, "Hey, you guys have got a problem." And the guy was like, "I am so sorry. We're just going to move you across the room and put you in a different bed." And it was probably, I still to this day, that was 8 years ago. I still to this day, like, it was a very traumatizing experience.
Can imagine.
Um, Bed bugs are definitely a thing. I will tell you that, and there's a lot of opinions about this, especially people who are more into like natural remedies. I have been told that tea tree oil, like if you just spray some tea tree oil on your bed, that can help. The thing that I have found is that was my second Camino. My first Camino, one of the things that I did do that I did not do on my second Camino was I sprayed all of uh, my backpack, my sleeping bag, and my clothes with it's called permethrin, and it's toxic while it's wet, which I know sounds weird, but once it dries, it is no longer like toxic, and it's a bug repellent basically. It's used in like when you can buy like clothes that are like bug repellent clothes. That's what they have in it. It's permethrin, and it. I didn't have any issues with bed bugs when I was in my first Camino. My second Camino, I did. So, and I sprayed my first Camino, and I didn't spray with permethrin my second Camino. So it's kind of, it's anecdotal. I don't know if that's why, or if I just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. But they are a thing, and I would recommend that, like, using Google, find out what they look like look for pictures of them, and then understand what the signs are and like what you want to look for. So like one of the things that I do, I even do this in hotels. I always will flip open the mattress, like I'll look under the mattress and see along the seams if there's any kind of sign that there are bed bugs in the bed. And then if I see something like that, then I'm going to probably change hotels. I'm going to ask for a refund. Same thing with an albergue. If you see like signs that there are bed bugs or you see bed bugs, let the Hospitalera know, and then I would leave and go somewhere else so that you're
Hmm.
not passing them along.
So permethrin, the bug repellent spray,
Yeah.
potentially some tea tree oil for more natural remedy, and
Oh,
don't put your rucksack on or near the bed. That's the number one way to spread them. I
correct.
personally, in all the Caminos I've done, the thousands of kilometers I've walked in the Camino, I've never been bitten, seen, heard. Not that you'd hear a bed bug, or maybe they do speak, I don't know, or make some kind of cricket noise, I don't know. But so I mean, but I have heard people talk about them. That's why I ask if it's just like a rumor or just a feared thing, or whether it's actually a really prevalent problem. But by the sounds of it, as long as you take those steps, you'll be okay. And like you said, Heather, as well, if at the end of the day you are tired of staying in albergs, there are often options of staying in hostels that do have private rooms. And the number one tip
Yep.
I'd give for that is do ask to see the rooms before you pay to stay in them, because that was my wife's great idea in our last Camino, and it's a good job we did that because there was a few places that we probably wouldn't have liked to have stayed in if we'd have actually got into the room but paid the 30, 40
Yeah.
euros that you have to pay. So excellent advice. That's a topic we've never covered there, Heather. So you've brought your Hospitalera experience into the interview there. So very, very grateful for that. And I'm sure many people will find it really useful, if not just a little bit scary. But um,
Well, and I don't want to scare people, but what I want people to be is aware. And
yeah,
because I think that if you have that awareness about you and you know what to look for, then you can avoid those situations. So it's more of a just being aware and understanding that yes, these things exist, and if you can take measures to prevent from experiencing them, like I would love to prepare people for that.
brilliant. Thank you very much, Heather. That's going to be really useful for loads of people. Now, I'm going to try and fly through the next few questions because I want
Sure.
to revisit some things you spoke about at the start, which was Japan. You did mention how Japan related to all this, and also you did talk a bit about the pilgrimage in Israel, and I want to see how that compares to the Camino and the two experiences. So, if we try and fly through the next few questions, and then we
Sure.
can talk a bit more about that at the end, and I also want to talk about at the end about how you said your renegade pilgrim is about how we can become pilgrims during civilian life, and I'd like to pick your brains on that as well. So let's just ask a few quick fire questions. So first thing on your kit list, barring the obvious of clothes,
hmm
what would be the
First
first
thing,
thing on your kit list?
I would say, as far as like importance, um, and again, this is also one of those things that's also very controversial, but my phone is probably one of the most important pieces of kit that I bring, and that's because, again, 10 years ago, I had a camera. I actually did have a cell phone, but I didn't use it while I was traveling. Now here we are, 10 years in the future, and cell phones are cameras. They're voice recorders. They're a place where you can journal. They're, like your phones are so versatile. And so for me, having my phone so I can document, take pictures, and share the experience with other people, I would say is probably like my biggest piece of kit that I always make sure that I have with me. And closely followed by good socks. This goes back to feet. You got to take care of your feet. And how do you take care of your feet? You have nice socks. So I don't skimp on socks. I will bring more socks than I will bring underwear because I want to make sure my feet are taken care of. So those are the two things.
Any specific kind of socks, material, brand?
I like wool, and I don't have like a brand favorite. I've used Smart Wool, I've used Icebreaker, I've used other like no name brand like wool socks, REI, since I'm in the States. But I know Canadians will use MEC, and then there's like Decathlon in Europe, so there's lots of options for people.
So wool socks, and just why
Yep.
quickly?
Because wool wicks away moisture, and so it helps keep your feet dry. And that's another thing that can cause blisters is if your feet get wet and moist, that can also result in blisters. So you want to try and keep your feet as dry as possible.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that. One thing you took you never used.
Oof, that's a good question.
See,
I
go on.
Yeah, I use everything. I would say the one thing that I didn't bring that I ended up having to buy
Yeah.
on my Camino Portuguese was a umbrella. Uh, I wouldn't be caught dead with an umbrella in Oregon because it's a point of pride that, Oregonians don't use umbrellas when they're out and about. But when I'm hiking, I always have a hiking umbrella with me. And I did not bring my umbrella with me when I was in Portugal, and I was there in the fall and it rained a lot. And I ended up having to buy one at one of the China shops because it was so wet.
What about a poncho or a rucksack cover or something like that? You just won't be seen in a poncho, or is that what it is?
I
Or
don't like ponchos. I'm
right,
not a huge
okay.
fan of ponchos. I did
Yeah,
have a rain jacket, so I did use my rain jacket.
yeah.
But there's something about having a umbrella that just kind of keeps everything off of you that I like. I still will have like I actually use a pack liner, so I have a like kind of like a garbage sack that I use to line my backpack to keep it from getting wet, like keeping the contents from getting wet. But I do like an umbrella. It's just there's something about it that just keeps the rain off my face.
It's because you like the movie, you like the song "Singing in the Rain," and just
That's right.
yeah, that's why. Admit it. No, I'm only joking. Okay, so that's a really really good tip there. And I'm also just intrigued, just quickly. Why don't did you say you call yourselves Oregonians?
Yes.
Oh, I'm glad I got that right. Why I've heard that it rains a lot there.
It does.
So why won't you be seen? What did you say? You wouldn't be seen wearing what or using?
An umbrella. So it's like a point of pride
Right,
with
yeah.
people from Oregon that we
Why?
don't use
Do you just get
umbrellas.
soaked
I
all the time then?
I know we do. It's just one of those weird things that we like to do.
Okay, well, maybe us British, who are also accustomed to a lot of rain, we could learn a thing or two. Why don't we just get soaked instead?
Yeah, exactly.
My wife would definitely disagree with you on that one, Heather. But anyway, so Oregonians don't use umbrellas. There you go. We've learned something else in the podcast.
Yep.
And you drink Mexican coffee. Every
Yes,
day's
we
a school
do.
day. Every day's a school day. Your favorite town, city, or village along the Camino and why? Could be the Frances. Give us the Frances and the Portuguese.
Okay, so those are such hard questions because there's some towns that just
Mm,
like had such strong memories. But I would say one of my favorites on the Frances was Astorga because they have a chocolate museum, and also because the mayor house in Astorga was designed by Gaudi.
mm.
So that's on the Camino Frances, and then on the Portuguese. I would say I really liked Padrón, mostly because of the peppers, but it was just a cute little town, and we had spent some time there because we had arrived early, and I met some really neat people and had some really cool conversations with people. So I would say Padrón for Portuguese.
So Padron is the last stop before Santiago on the Camino Portuguese, isn't it?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
And like Heather says, you must try the Padron peppers. 1 in 20 is supposed to be the spicy one, so beware of that.
Yeah.
So they say. So yes, Padron on the Camino Portuguese, brilliant. And Astorga, the Episcopal Palace, the place you want to visit.
Yep.
And the yes, you heard it right. You heard Heather right. Chocolate Museum. I remember there's like bars of chocolate that cost like a few €100 in there. Really
Hmm.
intriguing stuff. I don't know how that's possible, but okay. So great stuff again. And your favourite albergue and why? Where should the pilgrims stay? What's one place they stay? Is it because like a quirky hospitalero or hospitalera? You had a nice experience there. Give us one on each.
Okay. So one of the places that I went to in I'm going to talk about the Portuguese route,
Yep,
and I need to double check here that I have the name correct. I think it was Pontevedra.
lovely place.
I did not stay in an albergue.
Hmm.
So what I ended up doing is this was a particularly rough day with rain. I had really been getting soaked. And so what I ended up doing is going online and I found an Airbnb, and I found an Airbnb host that had private rooms. And I reached out to her and was like, "Hey, I'm on the Camino. I'd love to stay at your place. What do you think?" And she was like, "Oh yeah." She's like, "I'm really close to the route. Just send me a message when you get into town, and I'll meet you like in the town square." And I was like, "Perfect." So this all ended up happening. I ended up staying in her house. It was a gorgeous place. It was in the old Jewish quarter of the city, and she just was a delightful host. And then we started talking, and it turned out she had also walked the Camino at some point in time in her life, and my shoes were really, really wet. And she said, I was like, "Yeah, I'm going to go out and, get some food." And she goes, "Oh, well, your shoes are really wet. You should dry them." And I was like, "Well, I don't really have anything. I actually didn't bring a second pair of shoes on the trip." And so, like, I think I might have had like some like flip flops for, like the shower, but I didn't have like an actual pair of like town shoes with me. I had packed pretty light. And she's like, "Well, which size are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm a, like, I don't know, 8.5 or whatever, or 9." She goes, "Oh, you know what? I still have my Camino boots. Why don't you put those on, and then you can use those, and then stick your shoes by the wood stove, and hopefully they'll, be dry by the morning." And so she let me borrow her boots. This was a woman who didn't know me, like, from Adam, and she like made the effort to do this for me and fed me lunch. She was also roasting chestnuts on her wood stove, which any of you who have been to Europe in the fall know that like roasted chestnuts are like everywhere and they're amazing. And she just was such a hospitable person, and it just really left a very strong impact on me.
Mm.
And so, not an albergue, but definitely an impactful experience on the Portuguese route. And then and I'm gonna completely forget, I'm just now forgetting the name of the town. It's outside of Santo Domingo de la Calzada, and it is the albergue that Paulo Coelho is the like kind of he's their patron. And I don't even know if this albergue is still in existence, but it was a delightful experience. And I'm trying to remember the name of the town
Do
off
you
the
know
top of my
what,
head.
Heather? One of our previous guests has stayed there recently as well, and I
Okay.
racking my brains, I cannot remember the name of it, but I will repost a link to it. And so it sounds
Yeah.
like you've had a good experience, and that was recently as well. So it is still going.
Good. That's great to hear that they're still going, because I know like albergues kind of open and close, especially private ones, because the cost is so it can be cost prohibitive to run them. It was such a fabulous experience. Like the meals were amazing, the hospitality was amazing, and it just I mean there were tons of places I stayed on the Frances that just were fabulous experiences, but that was one that just really kind of sticks with me.
Okay, I'll definitely re-find that link. I think it was a guy called Peter Osmond, episode 15 or 16, that stayed
Okay.
there, and that was the reason he chose to stay there as well, because Paulo Coelho, the Brazilian author, had stayed there as well. So, okay, two great recommendations there. So, and I like that story that you mentioned about the lady that did all those extra things for you, and that wasn't part of the
Yeah.
bargain as well. And it's those random acts of kindness, those selfless acts that people do for you, from whom you don't expect it, that you remember the most on the Camino,
Yep.
and that I believe make a big impression on you when you go home after the Camino.
Mhm.
You remember these moments, and that makes you want to be, in your own words, a renegade pilgrim, like to live that spirit in
Mhm.
everyday life, not just when you're on the Camino. And so I love hearing those kind of stories, and to me, that's what makes the Camino magical. And so I'm really glad to hear you've experienced that as well. And for those that are going to walk the Camino, you will find that as well. You're just going to be open, ready, and willing to take it. Because I remember I had a similar experience in Hospitalera Orbigo. It was a private
Mhm.
albergue, and the guy invited me in, and I stayed there. And then he invited me to have some food with him, and I was in the kitchen with him, and he cooked this whole meal, and I thought it was going to be for everyone that stayed there, and I thought it was going to be for him or whatever. And then he just threw it down on the plate in front of me and said, "Yeah, have that." And I was
Mhm.
like, what have I done to deserve this kind of thing? I felt guilty, but you know,
Mhm.
I gratefully accepted and thanked the guy forever. And that was in Hospital de Orbigo. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's definitely many of these kind of stories will always surface on the podcast, and I love to hear them. And we already talked about a Spanish food, which would have been the, let's go for the padron peppers. Is something in Portugal
Yeah.
that you remember that tickled your taste buds?
I love the tarta de Santiago, and I also love the tortilla española. Like I make it at home, and oh, and caldo gallego. I mean, there's so many different things, but
Mm,
I would say
yeah.
like those were some of the highlights for me. Those are the things that when I wanna remember my Camino, those are the things that I like kind of go to.
Anything in Portugal can you remember that would have?
Portugal, it was really interesting because Portugal, it's a coastal country. More, I mean, Spain is too, but like Portugal is definitely like very coastal in so many ways. And so I would say like the mackerel and like some of the fish was really, really tasty.
So get your teeth into the Portuguese seafood.
Yep, absolutely.
Brilliant. So what was the hardest part of the Camino for you of both Caminos?
The hardest part on the Frances for me was the first day because I was very, very out of shape. And then I would say the Camino Portugues for me, because I was doing the coastal route, was the wayfinding was really really challenging,
Mm.
and there weren't a lot of good resources in English at that time. I know that there's better resources now, and so I wouldn't have as many concerns if I were to do it again.
Yeah, and I would echo those problems as well, echo those sentiments that the signage is still a problem on the Camino Portuguese, and especially from Lisbon. it's
Yep.
questionable. And my wife and I got lost in a forest and ended up walking through a soup of mud and just bog and marshland. So,
Oof.
yeah, for those of you that are going from Lisbon, just be prepared for that, and just know that you might want to double check your route and where you're going. So, okay, let's get to the how the Camino has shaped your life afterwards. And one of the things on your Renegade Pilgrim blog and website, you talk about how you can use that experience to shape your post Camino life. And what lessons have you taken from the Caminos and stitched into your daily habits from the Camino, if any?
I think that the biggest takeaway is that, especially, the world is kind of a dumpster fire right now, and or at least it is here in the U.S. And I think the thing that I always have to constantly remind myself is that people are good, and I think the Camino is a really great reminder of that. Is that people are good, and people want, like we all have more in common than we have different. And if we can focus on the things that we have in common and we can be kind to one another, then it's going to make the world a better place. Because I think the Camino is this really magical experience that people get, and it can help them have a change in perspective. I mean, I know of a guy who was kind of not known as a super nice guy, and he came and he did the Camino, and it completely changed his life. He has completely changed the way that he lives his life. His reputation has changed, and he's now known as this like really nice guy who like does these things for people, and it was the Camino that like caused that transformation. And so I think the hardest part is when you do the Camino and you're in this like very controlled environment, it's really hard to then go back. And so there is like that readjustment period that happens. But I think if you could just remember those happy times, those things that happened that that put a smile on your face, and then bring that back with you into the world, I think that's definitely going to make the world a better place overall.
And relating back to your travels to Israel and Japan, how do they tie into your overall Camino relationship?
Yeah, so Japan was kind of an interesting thing. I didn't know about the Camino or the Kumano Kodo. And the Kumano Kodo, for those of you that don't know, is actually a UNESCO World Heritage Walk, just like the Camino de Santiago is. And it's a sister walk to the Camino. And it's a Buddhist pilgrimage walk. It's very, very different from the Camino. And I learned about it when I was in Japan at the end of my round the world trip. So I started out on my round the world trip in Spain, and I ended in Japan because I have a friend that lives there. And I'm just going to kind of give you a little short story about
No, take your
my
time.
how my Camino started in Spain and ended in Japan, ironically. So flash forward 4 months after my Camino, I'm in Japan, and I am with my friend who lives there, and he lives on a tiny little island just outside of Fukuoka, south of Fukuoka. I think it's considered an island. It might actually have some other name, but and we are in a museum that is for the history of the hidden Christians in Japan. So during the time of the shoguns in Japan, Christianity was outlawed, and so people that were Christian had to kind of go underground. And then, so there's all these museums in the area that kind of talk about that. And we're in this church. It's my last day in Japan. I'm leaving to go back to the United States the following day, and my trip is coming to a close. And we're in this church, and this is like this, or not church, but we're in this museum, and this is like the second or third museum that I've been in about this. And so, I'm seeing the same things, and everything's in Japanese, so I don't really understand a lot. But I'm with my friend, and I'm with the pastor of the Catholic church in town, and they both are, kind of translating things for me. And out of the corner of my eye, I look over and I see a pilgrim staff, a shell, and a gourd. And I look and I'm like, that's a Camino. That's a Camino shell. Like that where did that come from? And And we asked the woman in the museum, and she didn't know where it had come from. But for me, that was a sign that my Camino at that point in time, the Camino that I had started when I started on my trip, was over. Like that was the end of my Camino. But the reality of it is that it wasn't the end. I went back to serve as a Hospitalera. I went back to walk the Camino Portuguese, and then this last year, in 2019, I took a sabbatical from work and I walked the Camino Coro. And so I didn't quite complete the requirements to get the dual pilgrim certificate, so I'm going to have to go back to do that. But I was able to experience that pilgrimage, and as a result of my very first pilgrimage to Israel, what it did is it opened up a way of traveling to me that isn't always about being a tourist, but about experiencing the sacred in the things that I'm seeing. So whether that is, for instance, going to Japan and walking the Kamano-Kodo, which is a Buddhist pilgrimage walk. I'm not Buddhist, but it's a pilgrimage for that tradition. And sometimes it could be as simple as just honoring the sacredness and the people that I am visiting when I'm traveling, whether that's going to India or other places, and kind of seeing the world in a very different place. And so I would say like pilgrimage and seeing the world as a pilgrim is different, and it's not better, it's not worse, it's just different. And I think it can allow you to open yourself up to different experiences and meeting people in a unique way that you wouldn't otherwise if you were like, say, on a tour or on a cruise ship or something like that. And again, nothing wrong with those types of travel, but it's just a different way that I see the world. And it's something that has left a very lasting impact on me, clearly, since that was so long ago.
It's a journey for the spirit as well as your body as well, isn't it? As well as your physical body. You feel like your spirit is
Absolutely.
growing, and you're finding new parts inside of yourself as well as in the in the world around you, which is the complete experience in a way, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. That's a lovely story, Heather. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
sharing that. And I'm very conscious of the fact, Heather, that I've had 55 minutes of your time, and I don't want to take up any more. Hopefully the Mexican coffee hasn't worn off. So I'd like to just close the podcast just by letting you tell the listeners where they can find out more about you and anything you'd like to say.
Sure. You can find our Camino de Santiago planning group just by searching for Camino de Santiago planning on Facebook. If you have an interest in learning about the Camano Kodo, I also have a Camano Kodo planning group. Smaller group. We have a little over 1,000 people, but it's a very passionate group as well. And then you can find me on Instagram. That's where I actually spend most of my time. I haven't been blogging a lot lately, but you can find me on Instagram at Renegade Pilgrim, and you can see some of my travels. If you go back through the summer, you can see some of my sabbatical photos from Japan, Korea, India, Kenya, and Tanzania. So if you like to travel, I post a lot of pictures of travel. I post pictures of coffee, and I also post a lot of pictures of food. So hopefully folks will enjoy that.
What about the whiskey?
The whiskey, I have not been drinking as much whiskey as I used to, but I will tell you, if you're looking for a good American whiskey to drink, Four Roses single barrel bourbon is delicious.
There you go. Heather Knight-Reiter, thank you so much for your time today. Have a lovely day, because I know it's 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning where you are. And
Yep.
buen camino, fellow peregrina.
Buen camino.
Wanderer, a life adventurer, said he's a secret philosopher. He's a wandering wanderer.